Blake Lewis covers the Washington Redskins for Redskins Wire, also Sports Journey. He's down there right now as the Skins break for camp for the first time, and it's always good to catch up. How you been, Lake?
Good, my friend. How you doing today?
I'm doing real well. Let's dive right into it. You know, it's funny because you look at this team right now on paper, and you know, they've had an interesting offseason, and I think we'll get to Kirk Cousins in a moment. But as far as the defense, this defense, they had moments last year. They could not stop the run. I know they made a bunch of moves in the offseason. They also drafted Allen, the defensive tackle. They've had some depth. What is the level of concern if you're a Washington Redskins fan when you talk about this defense, especially the run defense? How worried should Washington Redskins fans be?
I mean, I think it's going to be much better. I mean, I really do. I think they have better personnel. They have better players to fit the scheme that Greg Minuski, their new defensive coordinator, who was, you know, outside linebacker coach last year,
Yep.
You know, what he wants to do. And, you know, and I apologize for the wind, but it's kind of windy down
No
here.
worries.
But he, you know, he wants them to play downhill. He wants them to be the aggressor and not sit back and let offenses, you know, what you've seen in the NFCs dictate to that defense. So
Yep.
I think the defense is going to be much improved. They went out and got a guy from Oakland that, you know, a lot of folks that I know from Oakland were disappointed to see go because he was a young guy that had really, you know, started to carve out his name, and they thought he could be a frontline starter this year in Stacy McGee. So the Redskins signed him free agent, and he's penciled in as a starter. You know, obviously they drafted Jonathan Allen out of Alabama,
Yep.
who won basically every defensive lineman award there was to offer in college football last year. And then, you know, they have some young guys that are starting to, you know, make people look up a little bit. And there's a guy that I've been impressed with through OTAs and minicamp, and today's no different in Joey Mbu. I think he's a guy that has potential to steal the starting tackle spot. So, you know, I expect a lot. And then on top of that, Q, if you think about it, they went out and got Zach Brown,
Yep.
middle linebacker that made the Pro Bowl in Buffalo last year. And,
solid run defender.
You know, right. So you get a guy like that, you get a hard-hitting safety and Ranger. So, you know, you have guys that they've upgraded some positions of need, and they're expecting some of the younger guys to take a step forward. So I would say right now, it's funny, I was just talking with Brian Mitchell, former Redskin, former Giant, you know, just
Former Eagle, yep.
Former Eagle, and we were just talking, and he was like, I'm impressed with the talent pool that I'm seeing out here. So they definitely look like they've made some upgrades. We'll just have to see how it works out on Sundays.
Yeah, and you got the two linebackers as well, Compton and Foster. So, you know, look, if they can clean up the run defense, you're right, and they got the secondary. You know, offensively, we've talked about it in nauseum with the loss of Garcon and the loss of Deshaun Jackson. You know, you look at right now how, you know, your two top receivers are going to be Crowder, they're going to be Pryor, but now you also got to deal with Jordan Reed, who just when healthy is extremely productive. I mean, is this going to be a lingering issue with Jordan Reed going into the season?
No, I mean, it's a sprained toe, and you know, I was told, you know, well, kind of off the record, but I think it'll come out sooner or later that he got a shot in the toe. You know, just you know, stem cell shot just to help, you know, push it along a little bit. But at the end of the day, this is a guy that, you know, I told everyone he wasn't going to get much work this offseason anyway because he's their best player. Jordan Reed and Trent Williams are the two best players on the Washington Redskins, and it's really not that close. They're that good. And you saw how the offense performs when Jordan Reed is in there. You know, he's dealt with a lot of different injuries over his 5-year career, mainly concussions. And I think that they just want to get him ready for the opener against the Eagles on September 10th. So I didn't expect to see a lot of him anyway. And I think now with the sprained toe, as you know, athletes, you get it all the time. And, you know, they play through it, but there's no need for him to have to do anything. They just need him ready come September.
How about Kirk Cousins, right? It just seems as though I just still don't get this. I don't understand. Is it the lack of the franchise having or the inability to just see that this kid can play? Or are they looking at last year against the Giants and he's going to break their heart again with a pick? I mean, what? It just seems as though he's banking on himself. They don't have a problem with it because they know eventually he's probably not going to be here or sign a long-term deal. It just seems that is there a disconnect there, or Kirk Cousins and Gruden, everyone on the same page?
There's clearly a disconnect somewhere because if there wasn't, he'd be under contract long-term. The question is, how bad is the disconnect? I don't think it's as bad as outside media are making it to be. I think both sides are comfortable with this guy playing on one-year deals, and this may drag out for another 2-3 years. I'm dead serious. And one thing I think a lot of fans don't understand is the Redskins have a lot of money. And when I say a lot of money, specifically their owner, Dan Snyder, the Redskins are still a top 5, top 7 world out of every sport, world-ranked team finance-wise, maybe top 10. And this is with the team that hasn't really won much. So it goes to show you that they do have money. And I think that they're comfortable paying this guy on one-year increments and waiting to see, what's there. I do think people know that Kirk Cousins is a very good quarterback. I don't think that's for debate. He's proven that. He's got record numbers over the last 2 years, throwing for almost 9,000 yards. But there are some glaring deficiencies on that resume, and one of them is he's 2-10 against winning teams. And he's had some bad games on national TV and important games. And, but at the end of the day, the football team isn't where it's not at the point where you can put a blame on him if they lose. Because at the end of the day, he didn't miss a field goal that would won a game in England when we were all there.
A horrible game. Yep.
Right. He also didn't give up a game-winning drive in 40 seconds in Detroit. That was the defense. He had an epic meltdown against Dallas week 2 where he threw an interception to Barry Church that even if you kick the field goal, you're up 6 now with 10 minutes left in the game and you have momentum. But he threw an interception that cost them from possibly going up 10. So you have moments like that. But by and large, the guys played exceptionally well, exceptionally good football. I just think that there is other layers to this. One of the layers that I think sometimes people don't understand, too, is that he wasn't Dan Snyder and Bruce Allen's guy. That was supposed to be Robert Griffin III. And I know people say, oh, come on, move on from that. But you have to understand, one of the reasons why RG3 was their guy was because he was marketable. He was a guy that made a lot of money for a lot of people in D.C., specifically the 2 gentlemen I just named, because he had the top-selling jersey in football. Kirk Cousins doesn't even have a top 50 jersey, and he's one of the top quarterbacks as far as stat-wise.
Yeah, but ultimately, but come on, you know this, right? At the end of the day, it's not about selling jerseys, it's about winning.
It depends on who you're talking to.
Come on. No, but that's why this franchise but hold on a second, Lake, but this is why people can't take the franchise serious with Snyder. You're more concerned about putting fannies in the seats and selling jerseys than putting a winning product on the field? I mean, come on.
And I do think that there's some validity to that whole assessment, that perhaps there's a reason for that, because let's face it, this franchise has been searching for a franchise quarterback for almost 35 years. I mean, you have to go back to Joe Theismann, who you could even question was a franchise quarterback. He was an MVP for 1 year, but this was a guy that had a run of maybe 4 or 5 dominant years. But we're talking about a guy right now just hitting his prime, and has shown you that he can play some dominant football. Why don't you sign this guy to a long-term deal? And again, that's this organization. So don't think us and guys like myself who cover this team on a daily basis aren't scratching our head on this. I mean, there's something to be said about this, but at the end of the day, they're going to go in another year. They're going to pay this guy a boatload of money, almost $24 million to be exact, guaranteed, $23.9 to be exact. And there's even talk next year that they're going to do the same thing. I don't think they should transition tag him, because that means that you'd have to pay him $28 million.
Exactly.
And you can't match another team. So they'll probably non-exclusive him again next year, see if they get some draft picks if he bolts. But if not, they're going to have to pay him $34 million. And again, that's not a lot of money to this team, because they're going to give it to guys in forms of upfront bonus salaries, things like that, where it doesn't hit your cap that hard.
All right, a couple more before I let you get out of here. Again, Lake Lewis joining us, covers the Washington Redskins training camp right now, 12:33 on Thursday. We'll take you up to 2. A couple of little tidbits around the NFL. The situation with Dallas, I know they brought in Hillman. They've got a bunch load of running backs, too, with Morris and McFadden. Does that tell you that there's a potential impending suspension coming down on Ezekiel Elliott? And, are you surprised that, again, I shouldn't say surprised, but does it not surprise you that once again the Cowboys refuse to just reel in a player and say, listen, this is how it's going to be?
No, it doesn't surprise me at all. And this has nothing to do with the team I cover and their rivalry or anything like that. It's just, you've seen it. The proof is in the pudding. They don't come down on the guys that they're supposed to come down on. And this has been the history of Jerry Jones being there. And to be honest with you, to be blunt, I was surprised that he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. Not saying that he's not, a great owner as far as, he spends money. He does what he has to do for that team to try to win. So no one can knock that. But one of the things that keeps that team from winning is a combustible locker room. And it's guys that are given a little bit of preferential treatment. And for Jason Garrett to sit up there and not answer questions that were posed to him about Lucky Whitehead, who
dropped the ball on that,
who I know literally from where I live. I mean, that kid got railroaded, and that was not cool. And it's okay. It's okay to just be honest and say, listen, you found a way to get rid of him because of the simple fact is you drafted the kid Switzer from Carolina, and
But not even that. You know what? It's perfect timing. Let's take away from the Elliott situation and let's make this kid the scapegoat. Because you know what? He's still a good special teams player.
And make it look like all along too that we're showing a form of discipline here. Well, you didn't do that with Zeke Elliott. You didn't do that with Greg Hardy.
Nope.
You didn't do that with Brent Price. You didn't do that with a lot of players that were clearly more valued players in that locker room as far as performance on the field. So shame on the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, I don't pile on stuff like that, but it is what it is.
It's a bad look.
It clearly looks bad. It clearly looks coached a little bit and coerced, and for Jason Garrett to get up there and just not really be able to say anything, I thought it was a horrible look on their part.
Yeah, it's no surprise. All right, last one before I get you out. I mean, it really isn't. Last one before I get you out of here. I don't know if you heard that the young kid Urshel from the Baltimore Ravens, the tackle, is going to retire 2 days after this CTE study has come out. I'm wondering from the players that you have spoken to, and I know when they get in training camp mode, they get in training camp mode, but have you spoken to anyone over the last several weeks about any of this? And now in light of this story that's coming out, where they'd be a little more weary going forward with their NFL careers? I mean, I think a lot of the players are aware of it.
It's just funny you say that. Just talk with Kirk Cousins about it, and he said that he needs to see more data or more data on it because he said that obviously you deal with 100 players and see what they were dealing with, but let's see what the people who really haven't shown symptoms and see if you still find something, in their brain scans or something like that. So in their CT scans. So he's like, they have to do more. He said, but at the end of the day, at least it's being talked about. At least, now it's seriously coming to light and shedding a lot of light. And in the case of John, obviously I have an affinity for that guy as a person. He's a Penn Stater, by the way. I'm sure your market can appreciate that. But he's just a smart kid. And when I say that, he's a genius. I mean, this guy had ridiculous majors at Penn State. I mean, everyone knows that about him. And it doesn't surprise me that a guy with that intellect, that he's made a decision that he feels like is in his best interest going forward, because he's got many other options in life, and I think that that's the key thing for him. He should be applauded for that.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, my friend, I'm not going to hold you. Listen, we're in full gear, so we'll definitely keep it locked in every week on the air with some segments, and certainly get you up here, get you in studio. We'll have a lot of fun breaking down the upcoming season. Always appreciate it, pal.
Sounds good, man. You're doing a great job as always.
All right, thanks.
You later.
All right, you got to be well. All right, you got to be well. Enjoy